Getting shiny Pokemon is one of the most time-consuming things you can do in any Pokemon game. In Pokemon Y, this remains true as the odds of finding a shiny are 1 in every 4,096 encounters. But in this video, I'm not going to be doing just a regular shiny only, and I'm going to combine the hardest challenging Pokemon with the most time-consuming by doing a SoulLink hardcore Nuzlocke using only shiny Pokemon. This means double the shinies, double the difficulty, and double the loss in my sanity. With that being said, me and my friend Daniel, otherwise known as D-Gangsta on YouTube, are ready to get into this run, so I start off by naming myself Zango and begin my journey through Pokemon Y. Daniel ended up starting his video on Pokemon X just for a little added difficulty between the both of us, and if you want to see his full perspective, you can find that using the links in my description or the pinned comment down below. If you guys don't know what a SoulLink is, the rules are going to be put on screen now, but to put it simply, we can only catch Pokemon in the same area, and the Pokemon we catch in that area are linked, so if one of them dies, both of them do. With that though, it's time for us to make what could be the most important decision of this entire run, and that's picking a starter. For my starter, I elected to go with Froakie, as Froakie is a really good shiny, and Greninja's is even better. Daniel decided to pick Fennekin, which gives us both a little bit more difficulty, as we can't just copy each other's strategies going into each fight. This simple decision ended up making our lives miserable throughout the entirety of this run, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It's time for us to start our first shiny hunt. Each time I went through this cutscene, it was about 30 seconds per encounter, which is 2 encounters per minute, 120 per hour, and an estimated time to find my shiny in about 34 hours. Now in the last shiny only I did on Pokemon X, it took me about 41 hours to land a shiny Froakie. This is honestly pretty close to odds, but unfortunately in this shiny only I wouldn't get nearly as lucky, and it took almost 4 whole weeks to land myself this shiny starter. Shiny, that's it, that's the shiny, let's go! Oh. There it is, there's the shiny. Oh my gosh, that's it, that took forever. Shiny Froakie, let's go, man, let's go. With that, Daniel also ended up landing his Fennekin, and now we could finally start the run. So after saying goodbye to my mom, Serena teaches me how to catch a Pokemon, and Shauna's surprised that the Pokemon fit in the Pokeball. Now I've made fun of Shauna for thinking this in the past, but seriously, she's kinda right. How does it fit in the Pokeball? Moving past that mystery, I end up finding myself in Sandalwood City, where I get myself this really nice hat. Now that I'm walking around absolutely styling, I start to think about how I want to deal with this next gym, and honestly, I don't really have that many good options. Unfortunately for me, styling can only take me so far, and I'm gonna have to catch another Pokemon. Daniel, on the other hand, really doesn't need one, so it took me a little bit to convince him on where we needed to start our next shiny hunt, but eventually he decided that we can both do it on Route 22. On this route, there's a lot of good options at Pokemon I can get, so after running around in the grass for only about 12 hours, I ended up landing myself this shiny Riolu. Riolu is probably the second best Pokemon I could have gotten here, which is really good for me, but not as good for Daniel, as he ended up landing a Bunnelby. Yeah, it's safe to say I definitely got the better encounter here, but either way, I ended up giving Riolu the nickname Mars. I then take a look at that nature and ability, and it's steadfast and just a neutral nature, so it really doesn't matter. Now I get to steal these roller skates off this poor girl, then run back and forth for a little while until eventually my happiness is high enough so Riolu evolves into Lucario. That gives me the steel typing, and on top of my fighting type, that means this bug gym should be a piece of cake. I head into it and challenge Viola for my first badge as she leads with Surskit, and I decide to lead with Froakie. With Froakie, all I need to do is go for a couple of quick attacks until eventually Surskit gets taken down, and this brings out the final Pokemon, Vivillon. Against Vivillon, I'm not really too keen on getting hit by an infestation and getting trapped into the battle, so right away I decide to switch out into Mars. Against Vivillon, I do pretty much the exact same thing I did against Surskit, and that's just spam quick attack. Since Vivillon's essentially doing no damage to me per turn, I get off as many as I want until eventually Vivillon goes down and I get my first badge. Daniel also ended up getting his badge pretty easily as he had that Fennekin who he picked at the start of the run, so we all knew what was going to happen there. This next gym definitely won't be as easy though, as it's a rock type gym and that's got disaster written all over it. Regardless, we can now head into Lumio City where we get the HM for return. I immediately give this HM to Lucario as it's going to be super powerful because of the high happiness. I use this TM to absolutely decimate Professor Sycamore in a fight, then I go into this cafe where I meet up with Lysander. His team is one of the most difficult teams in all of Pokemon X and Y, and his Mega Gyarados can be a real run ender. But he still has a really dumb haircut, so I don't even care. Passing by that though leads me onto Route 5 where I get sniffed up on by another Lucario, and honestly this feels like cheating a little bit. I mean, I have a Lucario of my own. I shouldn't be doing this. Thankfully, I'm able to go tell that weirdo to go away as I then go beat up some preschoolers just to simply evolve my Froakie and Frogadier. I then get into a fight with Tierno, who's only got a Corphish, so it's a pretty easy one as now I can head into the next town. Once I get here, I find out that there's a pretty big problem, and that's a Snorlax. An even bigger problem though is this guy's hairline. Oh my goodness, is that far back. I'd be pretty upset with the world too if my hairline looked like that. In the Pokemon Center, I find myself the Name Raider, and I use him to finally give my Frogadier nickname Neptune. It's time for me to stop stalling though, as I've got to go to Perfum Palace to get the Pokeflute. I spend an arm and a leg just to even get inside the place, but eventually once I do, I run around for a little bit until eventually I find this random Furfrou. I decide to trap it with Shauna so I can try to catch it, but unfortunately the owner comes and takes it from me, which is really unfortunate because I did want a Furfrou on my team. Just kidding. No, I didn't. That Pokemon sucks. Before leaving the palace, I watched some fireworks with Shauna. Things get a little spicy as I get the TM for Protect, and I also get the Pokeflute. I don't even get the chance to use the flute yet though, as Daniel lets me know that his team really isn't that great for the upcoming Rock Gym. We then both decide before moving on, we should probably start another shiny hunt right here on Route 6. This again was another relatively quick one, as I ended up getting myself a shiny Esper in only about 7 hours. Wait, that's it! Oh my gosh, that's the shiny Esper! That's the shiny! Oh my gosh, I wasn't even looking! I was looking at my dog! Oh my gosh, that's the shiny! After getting that Esper, I give it the nickname Mercury, then check out that nature and its defense down, special attack up, which could be good later on, I'm not sure yet. Along with that, I also have Infiltrator, which is definitely the best of the two abilities I could have gotten, so I'm pretty happy with that. With that, you're probably wondering what Daniel got here, and it was a Honedge, which is definitely the better encounter. He also had a pretty crazy shiny reaction for this one, and again, if you want to see that, it'll be down in the description. With those shinies added onto our teams, we're ready to continue our journey. For me, that means waking up this Snorlax and smacking him in the face with 2 returns to take him down. Not really sure why we couldn't just step over him, and it seems like there's enough room on the bridge, but either way, I get past him and get into a fight with Tierno and Trevor. This fight is pretty easily won with the help of my rival, then after that, I just go on to Route 8, then Ambrit Town. In this town, I get the TM for Rock Smash, which could be pretty useful for this next gym, and then I head into Glittering Cave. This is where I have my first real encounter with Team Flare, or as this scientist calls them, Team Flare? After defeating those guys, I can freely head into Silage City, which is home to the second gym leader, Grant. Grant, as I mentioned earlier, is a rock-type gym leader, so for me, this fight should be pretty easy. He leads this fight with Amora, as I lead with Lucario. With Lucario, I start out with a Power-Up Punch, which is 4 times super effective, so it's no surprise that this KO'd. Power-Up Punch raises my attack stat up by 1 stage, as the next Pokemon that comes in is Tyrunt. Tyrunt actually survives the first Power-Up Punch, but is definitely no match for 2, as after I hit him with the second one, I win my second badge. With that, Daniel earns his second badge as well, and now we can kind of just continue on into the game. To do that, we've got to move through Route 10, and here we find out that there's actually a lot of good Pokemon. With that knowledge in mind, we're both ready to sit down and start another shiny hunt. This shiny hunt definitely wasn't as lucky as the previous 2, but it was still relatively mild, as it took about 25 hours to land this shiny Golett. I give him the nickname Vulcan, then check out his ability, and find out that it's Iron Fist, which is actually really good. As well as that, he has a minus speed nature, which would be pretty bad on any other Pokemon, but Golett's already really slow, so I don't actually mind. That being said, Daniel gets an Eevee that he promptly evolves into a Sylveon, so I'll let you guys decide who got a better encounter there. Now, after chasing Team Flare out of Route 10, I get to evolve my Esper into Meowstic, then I challenge Corinna in my first battle with her. With Golett on the team, these Lucarios stand no chance, and after defeating them, I head into Reflection Cave. In Reflection Cave, I reflect on the countless hours I've spent shiny hunting, and I then try to move past it by going on to the next city. On my way there, Tierno flashes me by giving me the HM for Flash. What were you thinking? After that whole thing, I find myself in the Tower of Mastery, where I have a battle with Serena. Thankfully, her team really isn't so elite right now, so I'm pretty easily able to deal with it with just Lucario, and next up is the 3rd gym leader, Corinna. This is the 2nd time we'll be fighting, but this time she leads with Mienfoo as I bring out Vulcan. Mienfoo actually doesn't have a single attacking move that can hit Vulcan, so after going for just a couple Shadow Punches, she goes down and brings out Machoke. Machoke also really doesn't have a move that can hit me, and he can only hit me with Leers, as I go for about 45 Shadow Punches that eventually takes him down. With that, the final Pokemon Hawlucha gets sent in, and after just a few Shadow Punches, gets pulled right back out, and I win my 3rd badge. Daniel also ended up having a pretty easy gym battle, as he had that Honedge from earlier, which is a Ghost type, and Corinna really doesn't know how to deal with those. This is going to be the last sort of easy gym of the run, as after this, they get way more difficult. This is especially the case for me and my Frogadier, as the next 3 gyms will be super effective against me, and they're Grass, Electric, and Fairy. Regardless, I'll just focus on the next one for now, and that's the grass-type gym leader Ramos. On my way to him, I get the HM for Surf, which is a super powerful move, so I immediately taught it to my Frogadier. As well as that, once I made it onto the next route, I got to ride around on this Go-Goat, which is pretty cool. I know it's not actually Go-Goat, but I really don't remember the name of the pre-evolution, so just correct me in the comments, I guess. Anyways though, it's time for another rival battle against Serena, and this is yet another easy one as her team hasn't changed at all. This right here is the last fight I have to do though before getting into the 4th gym battle with Ramos. He leads the fight with Jumpluff as I bring out my Lucario. I start with a simple Swords Dance as Jumpluff decides to hit me with an Acrobatics, which does exactly 30 HP. At this point, I figure out Jumpluff even with a crit doesn't kill me, so I decide to set up a second Swords Dance as Jumpluff hits an Acrobatics, taking me down to 42. At 42 remaining, I feel confident enough to go for a return, and that's enough to kill the Jumpluff, bringing up the next Pokemon Go-Go. Because I got off those 2 Swords Dances earlier, I do just enough damage to KO with a return, and that takes out the final Pokemon, Weepinbell. Weepinbell is way less bulky than Go-Goat, so I'm happy to say it only takes 1 return to finish off this fight and get me the 4th gym badge. That fight definitely could have gone south if Jumpluff crit me twice in a row, but honestly, that was pretty unlikely, so I'm happy with how that went. Daniel also ended up getting a pretty good fight out of that one as his Hone Edge is really good. That being said though, it's time for us both to make it into the power plant where we've got to stop a bunch of Team Flare members. While I was in here, I met up with this construction worker who says, "What do you mean you're here to rescue us? You're just a kid." And honestly, he's right, I should not be here. Regardless though, I trudged forth, beating all of Team Flare in the process, and also evolving my Frogadier into Greninja, and just perfection, look at this shiny. I then meet up with this dude who's really tall, kinda like me in real life. No, I'm just kidding, I'm not. Either way, this does bring me into Lumio City, where I actually end up getting stuck somehow. I'm not really sure why. There's a spot in Kalos where you just can't move, but I ended up getting stuck just staring at this hiker dude. Luckily, after restarting my game, I'm finally able to move, and at this point, I'm ready to challenge the 5th gym. This gym is the electric type gym, so I'm gonna need a real strategy if I'm looking to win this fight. Thankfully, I've got just the thing as Clement leads with a Molga, and I lead with Greninja. I start by hitting a Surf, doing over half, taking a Molga down into the red, as he then hits me with a Volt Switch. This is exactly what I wanted though, as now I get a free switch into my ground type, Golett. Golett doesn't take any damage on the switch in because Magneton went for a Thunderbolt and now I'm a ground type. On the next turn though, Magneton's able to get off a Mirror Shot, which takes me down to 41 remaining, but I then get off a Bulldoze, which is 4 times super effective and activates Sturdy. With Magneton surviving at 1 HP, he keeps getting healed by Hyper Potions, but it doesn't really matter as I'm lowering his speed every time with Bulldoze. Eventually, I'm just able to outspeed and finish off the Magneton, which takes out the ace Pokemon Heliolisk. Now this Heliolisk has Grass Knot, so I've definitely got to switch out, and I decided to do that into Lucario. Lucario tanks a Grass Knot on the switch in, and on the next turn, I go for a Bulldoze, which does about half. Heliolisk then nails me with a Thunderbolt, which probably could have killed with a crit, but thankfully I do survive, which allows me to get off a Bulldoze on the next turn, taking down Heliolisk and bringing out the final Pokemon, Emolga. Now Emolga's already in the red from that first encounter with Greninja, so with Lucario, all I need to do is get off a return, which I do, finishing off Emolga and winning me the battle. That wins me a pretty hard-fought 5th badge, and after checking in with Daniel, I figure out that we both got through a Deathless, so that's really solid. Now, rather than moving on to the next area of the game, I decided to just look around for some more clothes. My hat is pretty cool, but I still feel like I need a few more options, so I decide to walk around Lumios for a bit, and I end up getting kicked out of a restaurant, and I also get kicked out of a clothing shop. The clothing shop kicked me out because they said I wasn't stylish enough to shop here, and how do you expect me to get more stylish if I can't shop? That whole encounter kind of just hurt my feelings, and to make up for it, I think the Pokemon Company should make the starters for Legend ZA, Snivy, Piplup, Scorbunny. Those are my big 3. Anyways, it's time to get back to the main part of the story, and to do that, I meet up with Lysander in this cafe. He gives me a King's Rock that I'll probably never use, and after that, I just go fight my rival. This fight's another one against Serena, and her team has actually gotten a little bit better. The big thing that changed on her team was Quilladin into Chestnut. Now with Chestnut, I figured I could just easily deal with it with Meowstic by going for a couple of Psyshocks, but I really didn't realize this thing has Bite. That ended up causing a really scary encounter as Chestnut hit me with a Bite and brought me down to 2 HP remaining. Yeah, I nearly lost a shiny there for not paying attention to the moveset, so I'm definitely going to be more careful later on. The last part of that rival fight is thankfully pretty easy, so after defeating Serena, I get to go into the Scary House. In the Scary House, I'm told a pretty bad spooky story, but I decided to give the guy a tip anyways, because it's gotta be pretty awful to sit in here all day. With that tip though, I'd like to give you guys one, and that's if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider hitting that subscribe button. My goal for this year is to hit 100k subscribers before the start of 2025. 5, and each one of you guys helps in that. Also, I'd like to see if we can get this video to 100k likes, maybe. I don't think it's gonna be possible, but I can hope, I guess. Huge thanks to all of you guys, and with that, I'll get back to the video. Our next stop is Laver City, and once I get here, I can immediately head straight into the gym. Now that I'm here, I teach my Lucario the move Poison Jab, as it'll probably be really useful in the upcoming gym battle. With that, Valerie leads with her Steel Fairy type Mawile as I bring out Lucario. Weirdly enough, Mawile doesn't actually have a single Fairy type move, so I'm freely able to go for a ton of power-up punches, which does a lot of damage to Mawile in the process. This eventually causes Valerie to use her Hyper Potions, and once she does, I fully take out Mawile with a few bulldozes. Mr. Mime is then sent in, but is swiftly taken right back out after getting hit by a 2-time super effective Poison Jab. This brings Valerie down to her final Pokemon, Sylveon. With the amount of power-up punches I set up against Mawile, I could probably kill Sylveon 2 times over again, but once is good enough, so after my Poison Jab, I win my 6th badge. After talking with Daniel, I figured out that he risked a crit in the last fight, which kinda just means I'm the better Pokemon trainer, I guess. Regardless though, he did come out on top without a death, so we're able to move on into the game, and that means moving into the Pokeball factory. Once I get here, I'm basically immediately able to evolve my Golett into Golurk. I then go ahead and show this girl who says she likes big Pokemon my Golurk, and she says that it's not big enough, which is pretty surprising because Golurk is massive. Whatever though, it's time for me to finish off the rest of the Pokeball factory, and Serena wants my help for some reason. I really wish I didn't have to help her, but you know, you gotta progress the story. I do end up landing a pretty solid trophy for my struggles though, and that's a big nugget, and maybe this is big enough for that girl. Probably not though. She says she likes 9-10 Pokemon, and I don't even know a Pokemon that is 9-10. Regardless, I do get a Master Ball 2, which is pretty nice, and after talking with Daniel for a little bit, we both decide that we probably should get another Pokemon. We don't necessarily need it for this next gym, but it'll always be nice to have, especially going into Lysander. That being said, we both decide our next shiny hunt should be right here on Route 14, as there's a lot of good Pokemon such as Skorupi, Goomy, and even Haunter. So after running around in the grass for almost 31 hours, I ended up landing myself a shiny Haunter. This really isn't the best shiny, but it is one of the better Pokemon on the route, so I'm still pretty happy. I give her the nickname Venus, then look at that nature, which is special defense down and speed up. This is okay, I guess, and Levitate's really good because it basically just removes my ground type weakness. Daniel got the best of both worlds though, as he got a Goomy, which is one of the best Pokemon on the route, and a not so bad shiny. I'll let you guys decide who got the better encounter, but only after I use my Gengarite on this poor hiker Ross, and you can see what this shiny looks like. It's really one of the best shinies in this game, and I don't know why they didn't just give it to his regular form. Either way, I just wanted to use the Mega Evolution to show you what it looks like. I can't use it for the rest of the run, just, you know, on this poor hiker, I guess. With that though, the next place I go is the Frost Cavern, where I've got to deal with a little bit of Team Flare. As usual, their teams really aren't too difficult, but as I was leaving the Frost Cavern, I end up seeing the sky, and why does it look a little blurry? Maybe I just need a pair of glasses, but either way, the next stop is Anastar City, where I've got to deal with a rival battle with Serena. This is the first one where she has 4 Pokemon, but thankfully I have 5 now, so my Gengar is pretty easily able to deal with all of her Pokemon. Along with that, in Anastar City, there's the 7th gym, but more importantly, there's a clothing shop, and I can finally get dressed up again. Let's see who's stylish now, random clothing shop in Lumio City. Now that I'm completely dripped out, I head into the 7th gym and fight Olympia for my badge. She leads with Sigilif as I bring out my Gengar. Gengar's a really fast Pokemon, so I'm able to actually outspeed Sigilif here and get off a Shadow Ball, which is enough to take her down. This leads into Slowking, who's a lot more bulky than Sigilif, so instead of staying in, I decide to actually switch out into Neptune. On the switch in, I didn't take any damage as Slowking went for a Psychic to try to hit my Gengar. This allowed me to get off a Grass Knot on the next turn, which did about a third as Slowking sets up a Calm Mind. This is a little worrying, but I still go for a Grass Knot on the next turn, which does a little bit less than before, but still almost a third. Unfortunately though, I get hit by a Yawn, which means on the next turn, I'm gonna fall asleep. So rather than doing any of that, I decided to switch out into Gengar. Now on the surface, Gengar is a pretty bad switch as Slowking has Psychic, and that's super effective against me. But because I previously had Greninja in, there was no chance that Slowking was gonna go for a Psychic, so I'm able to actually get a free switch into my Gengar. Well, about as free as it gets. I still got hit by a Yawn, but I am able to get off a Shadow Ball, which finishes off the Slowking and takes out the last Pokemon, Meowstic. Sadly, because of that Yawn, I'm asleep going into this Pokemon, so I've got to switch out right away into Greninja. This does end up being pretty fine though, as Greninja really doesn't take any damage from Meowstic anyways, and after a couple of surfs, she just goes down. That wins me my 7th badge, and takes me just a step closer to Lysander. Before I can move on to that though, I check in with Daniel, find out that he won the 7th gym as well, and he's actually got a plan for Lysander. Looking at his overall team, I'm really not surprised, as it's a lot better than mine. Obviously though, this is a SoulLink, and in order order for him to get out deathless, I have to get out deathless as well. Either way, it's time for me to actually get started with this Team Flare stuff as I head into Lumio City and then the Lysander Cafe. Once I get in here, I kind of get the idea that nobody really wants me around, as they say today's special is Scramble, which doesn't even make much sense. What exactly are they scrambling? Regardless, I can quickly pass that area and head into my first battle with Lysander. This one's the easiest of the three, as he doesn't have his Mega Gyarados yet and a lot of his team members aren't evolved yet. It's after this that I can head through this massive Team Flare hideout to eventually make it to the top and meet up with AZ and Lysander. This is where they just talk about a bunch of story that happened in the past, and hopefully it gets brought up in Legends ZA, because I actually think it'd be pretty cool there. I now can go upstairs just a little bit more to activate the ultimate weapon, which I guess was gonna happen anyways, but I kind of feel bad that I pressed the wrong button. Just think about these poor people in Geosench Town though. I mean, they just lost their homes for actually no reason. With that, I do have to go to Geosench Town just to go check out the damage and have my second battle with Lysander in his underground lair. Where did this guy get the money for all this stuff? This is another one of the easy fights with him though, because he doesn't really have his Mega Magikarp yet. That being said, now I need to go deeper into the lair until eventually Shauna says some stupid stuff about how we need to be friends and stick together, blah blah blah. I'm just trying to get to my final fight with Lysander, and to do that, I've got to go through this massive cutscene with Yveltal where he gets put on my team. He's not really supposed to be there though, and since it automatically forces him to the front of my party, I'm actually at a really big disadvantage going into the fight with Lysander. In order to prevent Mienshao from setting up a Swords Dance, I've got to make an immediate switch into Mercury. Thankfully, Mercury doesn't take too much damage from a high jump kick, as it takes me down to 122 remaining, and on the next turn, I get off a Calm Mind. After another high jump kick, I'm left with 70, but I do get healed up a little bit from my Citrus Berry. This allows me to go for yet another Calm Mind on the next turn, bring my special attack stat to +2. However, Mienshao also raises his attack stat by +2 by going for a Swords Dance. This puts me in a really precarious situation, as I've got to risk a crit here by going for a third Calm Mind. Mienshao at +2 lands a high jump kick, but thankfully it does just enough damage not to kill, and that allows me to get off a Psychic on the next turn. At +3, Psychic has no problem killing, as this brings in the next Pokemon, Pyroar. To be honest, Pyroar really doesn't have that great of a special defense stat, so after yet another Psychic, I'm on to Honchkrow. Thankfully, I did account for this, as I have Thunderbolt, which is super effective, and this brings out the final Pokemon, Mega Gyarados. This is the entire reason why I set up so many Calm Minds earlier, as I can only kill this Gyarados if I had set up 3 Calm Minds earlier in the fight. Thankfully, that's exactly what I was able to do, and after just one Thunderbolt, I was able to kill the Magikarp and win me my final battle against Team Flare. Daniel's fight with Lysander went way easier than mine, as he has an Aegislash who has King Shield, so that fight was kinda just a piece of cake for him. That's one of the hardest parts in this game down, and the next big challenge is gonna be the Elite Four. To get there, I've gotta finish this gym challenge, and to do that, I've gotta head towards the 8th gym. On my way there, I get to go to Koroway Town, which has me in a fight with the Professor. Now, he has all the Kanto starters fully evolved, so you'd think this fight would be pretty easy, but for some reason, it was actually really hard. The Venusaur at the front of his party really wasn't an issue, but the Charizard he had next definitely gave me a run for my money. Now, according to my damage calcs, I had basically a 90% chance to one-shot this thing with Thunderbolt. Unfortunately for me, I didn't get the one-shot, and Charizard survived with a Sliver. Charizard then nailed me with a Flamethrower, which left me with 1 HP remaining. It really doesn't get any closer than that, and honestly, I just almost lost my Gengar. Thankfully though, after another Thunderbolt, Charizard went down, and I was able to win the fight from there. That definitely had me sweating bullets though, I won't lie. Next up, I have 3 consecutive rival battles, but these ones are actually a lot easier, as I don't have to deal with a random Charizard. I also played these fights a lot safer, because I didn't want anything like that Charizard situation to happen again. After mowing down all my rivals, I head into Snowbell City, then the Winding Woods to find the gym leader, Wolfric. After sending him back to his gym, I talked to Daniel for a little bit, and we decide it's probably a good time to start our final shiny hunt. We have the perfect spot to do it too, as we can go back to Route 18, where there's a bunch of good Pokemon we can catch. There's some pretty good options here, such as Pupitar, Lairon, Girder, and more. That being said, for this final shiny hunt, it was actually one of the easiest ones in the entire run, and it only took me about 5.5 hours to land this shiny Girder. This Girder I caught, gave it the nickname Jupiter, then evolved it into a Conkeldurr. With Conkeldurr, I found out that the nature was defense down, special defense up, which honestly really isn't that great, but it does have the ability Sheer Force, which is really solid. With that, Daniel got himself a Lairon that he swiftly evolved into an Aggron. I think I got the better encounter here, as Conkeldurr is really cool, and Aggron is kinda just meh. No offense to you Aggron supporters out there, but this one's just not my favorite. Regardless, it's now time to get into my final gym battle with Wolfric. He's an Ice-type gym leader and leads with Abomasnow as I bring out my Lucario. Abomasnow Gyarados got Snow Warning, so it sets up Hail right away, but it really doesn't survive for long as I've got Close Combat and it's super effective. That 120 base power fighting type move is enough to disintegrate this knockoff Snowman and lead into Cryogonal. Cryogonal has an insanely high special defense stat, but thankfully Close Combat is a physical move, so after going for it, it does enough to take him down. This brings out the final Pokemon Avalugg, who is basically the complete opposite of Cryogonal and has absolutely zero special defense. Because my Lucario is a mixed attacker and has Aura Sphere, I can safely go for that, which does enough damage to KO and win me my final gym badge. This was a really easy one for me and was basically the exact same for Daniel, but he did take some damage, so again, I guess I'm just the better Pokemon trainer. Obviously though, we both got through that death list, which means the next step is Victory Road, then the Elite Four. First things first though, going through Victory Road means we've got to fight our rival one last time. At this point in the run, my fights against Serena have been relatively mixed. The last fight we had up against her was pretty easy, but the fight before that was a pretty close call, so I'm not really sure how this is gonna go. She leads with her Meowstic as I bring out Venus, my Gengar. With Gengar, the first thing I do is get off a really powerful Shadow Ball, which is enough to one-shot Meowstic and bring out the next Pokemon, Absol. Absol doesn't have nearly enough HP to survive a Dazzling Gleam, and after that Oko comes Vaporeon. Vaporeon is pretty bulky, but after 2 Thunderbolts, I'm able to take her down, and I've got 72 HP remaining going into Altaria. Against Altaria, I start with a Dazzling Gleam, but honestly, I really shouldn't have, as I then get hit by a Dragon Pulse, which does take me down to 15 left. I totally risked a crit here for basically no reason at all, so I'm not really sure what I was thinking, but either way, another Dazzling Gleam does finish off Altaria. This brings Serena down to her ace Pokemon, Chestnut. Chestnut's the last Pokemon, and at this level, he no longer has access to the move Bite. This means I can pretty safely switch into Mercury and go for a Fake Out and Psychic combo, which does just enough to finish off Chestnut and win me my final rival battle. Now, all that I've got left to do is go through Victory Road and head into the Pokemon League. With that, I bring my team up to the level cap, adjust some of the movesets I have, and talk to Daniel and get ready for this Elite Four. To start off this Elite Four journey, me and Daniel both have to pick who we want to fight first. In the end, we decided on fighting Seabold first, as we believe it'll be one of our easier battles. Against him, I lead with Mercury as he leads with Clawitzer. On the first turn, I like to go for a Calm Mind, raising my special attack and special defense stats as he then hits me with the Dark Pulse, doing a little over half. On the next turn, I set up another Calm Mind, as if I don't set up 2, I likely won't kill with a Thunderbolt. Thankfully, this does raise my special defense, so barring a crit, I should be fine here. Luckily, I don't get crit, which leaves me with 7 HP, as on the next turn, I can finally take down Clawitzer with a Thunderbolt. Meowstic's already relatively fast, and the next Pokemon to come in is Barbarnacle, and I'm definitely faster than this thing, so a +2 Thunderbolt's able to kill. Third is Gyarados, who's also going to get outsped, and hit by a 4-time super effective Thunderbolt, bringing out the final Pokemon, Starmie. This is the only Pokemon I'm worried I won't outspeed. I could decide to swap here, but in the end, I like to stay in, as I'm a level 65, and Starmie's level 63. This allows the level cap to play in my favor, as I'm barely able to outspeed and take out Starmie, winning me my first Elite Four battle. Daniel won his fight as well, thanks to Goodra being extremely bulky, and after that fight, we decide the next one we want to take on is Wickstrom. Mainly because we both have a pretty good strategy for this battle, and we think it'll be an easy one. Hopefully, I don't end up eating my words, as he brings out his Klefki, and I take out Golett. Klefki starts by nailing me with a Flash Cannon, taking me down to 139, as I then go for an Earthquake, and because it's super effective, it does just enough damage to kill. This leads into Scizor, who has Night Slash, so I'm a little bit worried to stay in, but I am pretty bulky, so I elect to stay put and go for an Earthquake. After getting hit by that Night Slash, I'm dropped to 51 remaining, but my Earthquake does a lot of damage, taking him below half. Now, I've obviously got to switch, so I move into Mars, as if he goes for another Night Slash, it's going to be not very effective. Thankfully, that's what he decided to do, and I'm able to take not very effective damage on the switch in, and on the next turn, I go for an Aura Sphere, taking down Scizor and bringing out Probopass. Probopass is a Rock Steel type, and because of that, I've got 4-time super effective Aura Sphere. He does have Sturdy though, so he's actually able to get off damage on the first turn, as he hits me with an Earth Power, but his special attack stat really isn't that high, so I easily survive. This forces Wickstrom to heal, causing me to go for another Aura Sphere, and then another, to eventually take this big ugly nose down and bring out the final Pokemon, Aegislash. With Aegislash in, I've got to switch because this thing has Sacred Sword, and thankfully I have a perfect switch for that, and that's my Gengar. Because Sacred Sword's a fighting type move, I don't take any damage, and Aegislash is forced into his attack form. This means that his defense stats are really low, and all it takes is a Shadow Ball to win me my fight against Wickstrom. Like I said earlier, we both had a pretty good plan for that one, so Daniel was able to beat it, and I actually decided on the next fight we were going to take on, and that one's Malva. This one should definitely be the easiest for me, as I have Greninja, and he's really good. All I've got to do against the first Pokemon Pyroar is go for a Surf, and it does enough to one-shot as the next Pokemon to come in is Talonflame. Talonflame's outsped and is also one-shotted as the third Pokemon to get sent in is Torkoal. Now you'd think because Torkoal is pretty bulky, he would be able to survive a Surf, but he's actually not even close, and I'm easily able to one-shot, bringing out the final Pokemon, Chandelure. You can probably imagine what happened to Chandelure as well, and that might have been the easiest fight I've ever had in the Elite Four. With that though, me and Daniel are on to the final Elite Four fight, which is definitely going to be the hardest we've had so far. Dragon types are not easy to deal with, and when Drasna leads with her Dialga, I decide to bring out Lucario. Lucario has access to the move Dragon Pulse, so I start by going for that as it takes Dialga down to almost half as she then hits me with a Surf. This takes me down to 140 remaining as on the next turn I elect to go for another Dragon Pulse even though it'll probably bring her into heal range, but I get a lucky crit so it's able to kill. This then brings out Noivern, and because I know Noivern is likely going to go for a Flamethrower, I switch into Neptune to take not very effective damage. This is the exact Pokemon I wanted for this moment though, as I have Ice Beam and that's 4 times super effective. This means after outspeeding, Noivern gets one-shotted by Ice Beam, and the next Pokemon to come in is Altaria, who's also 4 times weak to Ice Beam. This means I'm already down to the final Pokemon Druddigon, and for this, I've definitely got to switch out. Druddigon has Return, which is super effective against Greninja, but doesn't do any damage to Gengar, so that's who I bring in. After that, I go for a Dazzling Gleam, which is enough to bring Druddigon below half, as I then get hit by a Dragon Tail, which swaps me out. At this point though, poor Druddigon is going to go down to any of my Pokemon, so when Meowstic comes in, all I need to do is go for a Psychic. This gets me the win in my final Elite Four battle. For Daniel, that fight also ended up not being as difficult as expected, but with the champion, we're both gonna have a problem. Diantha has a pretty solid team, and I'm gonna look to go through this fight without taking a single death. She's got a Mega Gardevoir, which will be a real pain in the behind, but I think I could still get through it deathless. She leads the fight with Hawlucha as I decide to bring out Mercury. Hawlucha's pretty fast, so she's able to outspeed and get off an X-Scissor, which is super effective. This does a sizable amount of HP, but after going for my Psychic, I realize it doesn't matter as I do enough to Oko. This brings in Gourgeist, and for Gourgeist, I've definitely got to switch out, so I move into my Greninja. This allows Gourgeist to get off a free Phantom Force, but since it's not very effective, I don't really care that much. The only reason I brought Greninja in anyways though was because after this Phantom Force, I need Gourgeist not to go for a second one. This would allow me to get a free switch into my Gengar, which is exactly what happened. Using that switch, I get to land a super effective Shadow Ball, taking out Gourgeist, bringing in Tyrantrum. Tyrantrum has a diabolically low special defense stat, and because of that, all I need to do is go for a single Dazzling Gleam. This brings in the next fossil Pokemon, Aurorus, who has Light Screen and Reflect, so I've got to be careful with how I deal with this. On the first turn, I try to go for a Shadow Ball just to see how much damage it does, and it doesn't even do half. I then do the same thing on the next turn, hoping for maybe a lucky crit, but I don't get it, and then I get hit by a Blizzard, which takes me down to 56 remaining. It was at this point that I found out that my Gengar was no match for this Aurorus, so I switched into Jupiter. Jupiter avoids a Blizzard on the switch in, but on the next turn isn't so lucky and gets hit by one, taking me down to 127. I then get off a Wake Up Slap, which is 4 times super effective, finishing off Aurorus' remaining health, bringing out Goodra. Now, since Goodra outspeeds me, I've got to stay in and risk a crit. Thankfully, after a Dragon Pulse, I don't get crit, but I do get brought down into the red, and I'm also able to land myself a Hammer Arm. This Hammer Arm leaves Goodra with less than a third remaining, but just out of healing range, so I can actually switch into Vulcan. On the switch in, Vulcan gets hit by a Dragon Pulse, taking me down to 134, but on the next turn, I actually avoid a Muddy Water. This is really solid, as I don't think the Muddy Water would have killed anyways, but it leaves me with a lot of HP going into this Mega Gardevoir. So it's all down to this 1v1 Vulcan versus Mega Gardevoir, and I click on Heavy Slam, but unfortunately, I'm not able to survive a Shadow Ball, which means I do not get through this deathless. It sucks because I really didn't want to take a death in this fight, but in the end, I kinda had to, as Mega Gardevoir is really hard for my current team to deal with. Either way, Mars is able to avenge Vulcan by getting swapped into and getting 2 Flash Cannons off, which is enough to take out Mega Gardevoir, crowning me the champion of Kalos. Unfortunately for me, that doesn't mean we're home free yet, as Daniel still has to win his fight. I tuned into this fight just at the end when it was him versus only Mega Gardevoir. At this point, he had 6 Pokemon remaining, but somehow Mega Gardevoir was able to eat 4 of them. Luckily, he was able to lock in and win the fight with Grand Slam, but geez, that was close. Thankfully, in the end, we were both left with 2 Pokemon remaining, which means we actually did complete this SoulLink. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and if you want to go check out Daniel's POV, you can find that using the links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one.